At 65 I thought desire could be managed the way I managed my pension, predictable, contained, budgeted into neat columns, but I was wrong, because what began as a simple exchange, an envelope of cash in a motel off Route 41, became the debt I could never repay. The motel had peeling paint and a neon vacancy sign that buzzed like a dying wasp. But when I pushed open the door that first night and saw Celina waiting on the edge of the bed, her eyes younger than her years, her posture sharp as if she'd learned never to flinch, I told myself I was only paying for company, not for love, not for danger. Yet when she laughed at my joke about the air conditioner rattling like a tractor, the sound hooked into a place I hadn't touched in decades. And suddenly it didn't feel like business, it felt like oxygen. I kept going back. 1 week turned into months. It wasn't just cash anymore, it was dinners at Little Cuban restaurants, bottles of wine, earrings slipped into her purse when she thought no one was looking. Each gift, each transfer, each whispered promise made me believe I was wanted not for my wallet but for myself. Harold the man, not Harold the husband graying at the edges of his own marriage. At home, Darlene noticed the cracks. She'd always been a quiet woman, humming while she brewed her morning coffee, keeping the house stitched together with patience. But I saw her eyes lingering on the bank statements. Saw her lips press thin when I claimed I'd been out late with friends. I thought I was careful. I wasn't. The night she set the evidence on the kitchen table, hotel receipts, transfer slips, her handwriting circling the totals in red pen, the world tilted. She didn't shout, she didn't hurl accusations. She just looked at me across that table and whispered, "You paid for love with more than money, you paid with me." Those words gutted me deeper than any scream could. They were the truth, stripped bare. Every dollar I gave Celina had been stolen from the life Darlene and I had built together. Every lie I told had been carved from the trust she'd carried for 42 years. And Celina? She vanished like smoke. One day her number disconnected, the text stopped, the motel room empty. The last gift I'd given her, a watch engraved with my initials, was never seen again. I realized then I hadn't bought love at all. I'd bought the illusion of being wanted. A dangerous fantasy that dissolved the second the money ran out. But the damage it left was permanent. Darlene moved into the guest room. The house grew colder, every familiar space warped into evidence of what I'd broken. Our daughter came over with the grandkids and asked why Grandma was sleeping alone. And Darlene didn't cover for me. She only said, "Ask your father." The shame that burned through me in that moment was worse than any debt collector pounding on the door. Nights became unbearable. I sat in my recliner staring at the empty glow of the television, my phone heavy in my hand, thumb hovering over Celina's disconnected number, wanting to demand if any of it had been real. But I knew the answer, it had been real only to me. I wanted to feel alive, and in chasing that spark I killed something steadier. Something priceless. The laughter of my grandchildren felt thinner now, like it echoed over a crack in the floorboards. My daughter's voice on the phone carried suspicion. My son's polite tone was edged with distance. The betrayal had rippled outward, touching lives I never intended to harm. And Darlene, she never left, but she never returned either. She moved around me like a shadow, cooking only for herself, folding laundry without leaving me a pile. One night, when the house was still, she came out of the guest room and stood in the hallway. Her hair unbrushed, her eyes swollen but dry. She looked at me like I was already a memory and said softly, "You spent money trying to feel alive, Harold, but what you spent from me, you can't pay back. Then she turned and shut the door again. That sound, the click of the latch, was louder than the buzzing neon sign at the motel. Louder than Celina's laughter, louder than my own pulse hammering in my ears. At 65, I thought I was buying comfort. In the end, I bought regret. The most expensive bill I ever paid wasn't written on paper, it was written in the silence of my wife, the distance of my children, and the knowledge that love, once squandered, can't be bought back, not with money, not with apologies, not with time. It was a debt that would follow me into every morning I had left. A reminder that sometimes the highest price isn't in dollars at all, it's in the people who stop looking at you the way they once did. I told myself I could make it right with flowers, with dinners out, with long apologies that bent toward excuses. But none of it touched the wall Darlene had built in her silence. She slept in the guest room. She cooked without setting a plate for me. She carried herself with the calm efficiency of a widow though I was still alive. And that indifference gnawed deeper than rage ever could. At night I'd lie awake staring at the ceiling fan, replaying Celina's words, "I need you, not your wallet," and wondering if she had whispered the same to 10 other men. Each believing the lie, each handing over envelopes of cash. The shame was a weight on my chest that never lifted. Even in church where I sat stiff in the pew beside an empty space, hearing every hymn as accusation. My daughter stopped calling as often, my son's voice on the line clipped and short. And I realized the affair had not only taken Darlene from me, it had taken the way my children trusted me, the way my grandchildren saw me as steady ground. One evening I walked past the mirror in the hall and startled at my reflection, an old man with hollow eyes, a man who had thought he was buying youth but had bought rot instead. Paying for love with more than money, paying with the only currency that mattered. The people who once believed in him. I tried to bury the evidence, shoved receipts into the trash, closed the bank app, deleted the old texts, but erasing paper didn't erase the distance in my own home. The air between Darlene and me was so thin it felt like we were breathing different worlds. And every time she walked past me without a glance I caught the echo of Celina's laugh. Cruel now, hollow, reminding me that I had traded 4 decades of devotion for moments that dissolved the instant money left my hand. One Sunday our daughter brought the grandkids over. And while they played in the yard she lingered in the kitchen, rinsing dishes with her back to me, and finally asked, "Dad, was it worth it?" The plate slipped from my fingers and cracked in the sink because there was no answer that wouldn't cut deeper, and when I turned she wasn't looking at me, she was staring at her own reflection in the window, like she couldn't bear to meet my face. And I felt smaller than I ever had. Smaller than the man who once begged Celina for another night. That evening, when the house emptied again, I sat in my recliner with the lights off. And for the first time I understood what I had really purchased, not love, not even desire, but exile, from my wife, from my children, from the man I had promised myself I would always be. The exile settled into routine, quiet but relentless, 2 plates at dinner shrinking to 1. 2 voices in the morning reduced to the clink of her spoon against a mug while mine stayed empty, and every night the click of the guest room door was a verdict I had to hear again and again. I thought time might soften her. But time only hardened the truth, 42 years of marriage undone not by a single night but by the lie I kept repeating until it became part of me. Sometimes I caught Darlene watching me from across the room, her eyes not angry but vacant, as if she were measuring the space where I used to stand in her life. Our son stopped bringing the grandkids by. Our daughter's calls grew shorter, her questions sharper. The betrayal had seeped outward like a slow leak, staining every bond I thought was unbreakable. Alone in the dark, I tried to remember the man I was before Celina. Before envelopes of cash in motel rooms with buzzing neon. But all I saw was the face of a stranger who had gambled everything for a laugh, a touch, an illusion, and lost more than money. He had lost the one person who made his house a home, and the family that once believed he was worthy of trust.